In today's video lesson, we shall carry forward the line-by-line explanation of the chapter The Enemy. Children, listen to the explanation very carefully. In the last class, we had read that Hannah, Sadau's wife, had given the anesthetic to the prisoner of war. He now was unconscious and Sadau was operating upon him. Now, it was Sadau's habit to talk to his patient. Now, let's see what is written. It is not quite at the kidney, my friend, Sadau murmured. It was his habit to murmur to the patient when he forgot himself in an operation. My friend, he always called his patients, and so now he did, forgetting that this was his enemy. Now, children, this paragraph, it throws light on the fact that Sadau was operating upon this prisoner of war like he did to any other patient of his. He made no difference. It was his habit to get into a one-sided conversation with his patients. So here too, he was murmuring something to the patient. And what did he say? That this wound, it's not quite at the kidney, my friend. And he always addressed his patients as my friend. Now, to this prisoner of war also, he addressed him as my friend, forgetting that this was his enemy. Then quickly, with the cleanest and the most precise of incisions, the bullet was out. Then, with a very clean and accurate, precise means very accurate of incision, he just gave a cut and the bullet was out. The man quivered, but he was still unconscious. Of course, it would have pained the man, but then he just moved a little and he was still unconscious. Nevertheless, he muttered a few English words. He was an Englishman and he muttered a few English words in pain. Guts, he muttered, choking. They got my guts. Sadau, Hannah cried sharply. Hush, Sadau said. Now he's saying that guts, they have taken out my guts, and he choked. Sadau, Hannah cried sharply. Now then, suddenly Hannah called out to Sadau, and Sadau asked her to be quiet. The man sank again into silence, so profound that Sadau took up his wrist, hating the touch of it. Now the man, he was again sinking into profound silence. Profound means a very deep silence that Sadau suddenly had to check his pulse. Okay, he took his wrist and he checked his pulse, halting the touch, hating the touch of it. Why? Because now he again realized that it was his enemy. Yes, there was still a pulse, so faint, so feeble, but enough. If he wanted the man to live, to give hope. The pulse was very feeble, very faint. The thumping was not very energetic, but then it was very faint, soft, but enough, which was proof that the man would live. But certainly I do not want this man to live, he thought. Inside his mind, the thought that was troubling him again and again was, this man is a nuisance and I really don't want him to live. Let's move on to the next page now. No more anesthetic, he told Hannah. He turned as swiftly as though he had never paused, and from his medicines he chose a small vial and from it filled a hypodermic and thrust it into the patient's left arm. Children, vial over here, it's a measurement. Okay, you must have seen those glass bottles, small vials they are, right? It's a measurement. And what did he tell Hannah? He told that no more anesthetic, it's enough. He turned as swiftly as though he had never paused, and from his medicines he chose a small quantity of that vial, and then he filled his syringe, that hypodermic is the syringe, and then thrust it into the patient's left arm. Then putting down the needle, he took the man's wrist again. The pulse under his fingers fluttered once or twice, and then grew stronger. So the pulse under his fingers, they were fluttering, they were not very steady, but then they were fluttering once or twice and then grew stronger. So he was now improving. This man will live in spite of all, he said to Hannah and sighed. Now what did he say? That this man, he has got a strong willpower, he has not given up, and he has bright chances of survival. He will definitely survive. And then he sighed. The young man woke so weak, his blue eyes so terrified. The young man, then he suddenly woke up. He was very weak and his blue eyes were so terrified. Terrified means he was feeling very afraid, and that fear, it was reflecting in his eyes. Let's move on to the next slide now. When he perceived where he was, that Hannah felt compelled to apologize. She herself served him, for none of the servants would enter the room. Now, when he perceived, when he realized where he was, Hannah, she felt compelled to apologize. She felt very sorry for that prisoner, isn't it? Why? Because now he was in a very pitiable state, children. And Hannah, she herself had served him with her own hands, as none of the servants would enter the room. When she came in the first time, she saw him summon his small strength to be prepared for some fearful thing. Now he was summoning, he was gathering all his strength, about to do something which was fearful, which horrified Hannah. Don't be afraid, she begged him softly. Strength to be prepared for some fearful thing. So he got afraid when Hannah said, "Don't be afraid," she begged him softly. "How come you speak English?" he gasped. Now the prisoner of war, he was surprised and he asked Hannah that, "How come you are speaking English?" He gasped. He was finding it difficult to breathe. "I was a long time in America," she replied. She saw that he wanted to reply to that, but he could not, and so she knelt and fed him gently from the porcelain spoon. But she could make out that he is finding it very difficult to speak, and so she again started feeding him from the porcelain spoon. So he was making an effort to speak, but then he could not. He ate unwillingly, but still he ate. Unwillingly means he did not want to eat, but then still he ate. "Now you will soon be strong," she said, not liking him and yet moved to comfort him. She consoled him by saying that you'll be fine and soon you will be strong enough. And at the same time, she was not liking what consolation she was giving to the prisoner of war. Why? After all, he was his enemy. But then, just to comfort him, she said these words. He did not answer. When Sadao came in the third day after the operation, he found the young man sitting up, his face bloodless with the effort. Now that man, he was sitting up, he was conscious now, and his face bloodless with effort. Bloodless with effort means it was still pale, it was still dull when Sadao came in the third day after the operation. So children, this page, it is telling us there is a difference between the attitude of the husband and the wife. The way Sadao is approaching the prisoner and the way Hannah is dealing with the prisoner, there is a lot of difference. Now you have to analyze this difference, children. Let's move on to the next slide now. "Lie down," Sadao cried. "Do you want to die?" He forced the man down gently and strongly and examined the wound. "You may kill yourself if you do this sort of thing," he scolded. Now he was trying to get up, isn't it? When Sadao cried that, "Please lie down. If you will make any such efforts, it may cost you your life." So don't be mad. Please follow the instructions. What are you going to do with me? Now finally, the prisoner of war asked him the question. But then what are you going to do with me? The boy muttered. He looked just now barely 17. He barely looked 17 years old. Are you going to hand me over? Hand me over to whom? To the Japanese army. For a moment, Sadao did not answer. He finished his examination and then pulled the silk quilt over the man. So he made him comfortable, and then he did not speak anything, or nor did he give any reply to the American soldier. I do not know myself what I shall do with you, he said. I ought, of course, to give you to the police. You are a prisoner of war. So he is very practically stating all this, that see, my duty was to hand you over to the police, and I must do that because after all you are a prisoner of war. No, do not tell me anything. Now he is saying that please don't tell anything to me. And why do you think he quickly added this sentence? So that the prisoner is unable to strike any further conversation, lest it would arouse pity and compassion in the heart of Sadao. Sadao was not frequently visiting the room of the prisoner, lest he would develop those feelings of compassion for him. He did not want to, go soft with his dealings with the prisoner. He put up his hand as he saw the young man was about to speak. Do not even tell me your name unless I ask it. So he is making, he is trying to save, or he is asking the prisoner not to utter even his name. He did not want to develop those feelings of compassion inside him, because he knew that at the end he has to hand him over to the officials. They looked at each other for a moment, and then the young man closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. Okay, he whispered, his mouth a bitter line. Outside the door, Hannah was waiting for Sadao. He saw at once that she was in trouble. Now what had happened? Hannah was there outside. She was waiting for Sadao, and she was in trouble. Now what kind of a trouble was she in? Let us read. Sadao, Yumi tells me the servants feel they cannot stay if we hide this man here anymore, she said. Now this was a bad news that she broke to Sadao. And what did she say? That the nanny, Yumi, she tells that the servants cannot prolong their stay in the house because they feel that we have hidden this man, this prisoner of war here. She tells me that they are saying that you and I were so long in America that we have forgotten to think of our own country first. He says that she feels that we are biased. Because we had spent such a long time in America, we had forgotten that our first and foremost duty was towards our country, Japan. They think that we like Americans. Now this is a wrong notion. It is not true, Sadao said harshly. Americans are our enemies, but I have been trained not to let a man die if I can help it. Children, this is the first and the foremost duty of a doctor, that if you can save a dying man, then do it, irrespective of the fact whether he is your relative, your enemy, or any common man, isn't it? So he is saying that whatever I am doing, I am bound by my duty. I am only answering the call of my duty. The servants cannot understand that, she said anxiously. No, he agreed. Neither seemed able to say more, and somehow the household dragged on. Somehow the household dragged on means, with a lot of difficulty, the work inside the house was going on. The servants grew more watchful. Watchful means more careful. Their courtesy was as careful as ever, but their eyes were cold upon the pair to whom they were hired. Means they were showing their courtesy, and that too, why were they showing their courtesy? Because Sadao was their master, isn't it? So they couldn't offend him, neither could they raise their voice against Sadao. So they showed their courtesy, but then their eyes, they were cold and towards the pair to whom they were hired. So they were a cold pair, their feelings towards their master, though they showed courtesy, but then it was very cold, unfeeling, isn't it? They did not want the master to shelter this white man. They wanted that he should be turned over to the Japanese officials, and whatever the master is doing, it's against the law. Okay children, I shall end my explanation here. Please listen to this again if required. Thank you.